I want to start with something and ask you, what do you think is the biggest technical innovation that happened on Ethereum so far? Or either in the blockchain completely? Is it EVM? Is it maybe DAO as a concept? Can we say that like token standards are something that was really good and really innovative? Or maybe NFTs as a, as a culture that we got? Or is it rollups that we hear about often? Or maybe some newer stuff like zk-TLS? There's a multiple of them, right? But I think we can agree that like one of the biggest one was like GM, right? The best way to do the intro in a crypto space. My point here is that a lot of stuff happened in the Ethereum ecosystem over the last 10 years, right? But when we think about it, I want to give you the perspective of zooming out and checking what was happening on Bitcoin during the same time. So if we go to the Bitcoin and we go to 2009, it's like the ancient history of blockchain, right? This is where it all started. This is how we got the first cryptocurrency, the most decentralized one, the promise of scaling the financial system so that we don't have any custodials, so that we don't have any third party that's controlling our assets, that we are in control of our own money, right? But then if you try to follow the same trend, like a couple of years later, there is not too much changing in terms of innovation. Okay, there was, of course, mining of Bitcoin, there were some exchanges, there were first wallets, but it's not that like we got so many innovations compared to what we got in Ethereum and similar ecosystems. A few years after that, some people got a new idea. The idea was, as you all know, let's try to put programmability on top of Bitcoin, on blockchain in general. Let's try to make something that we can code as a logic and put it on blockchain, and in that way enable much more expressive solution that blockchain can enable. I don't know if you know the story, but Vitalik actually tried to do this on Bitcoin. Ethereum was supposed to be a project on Bitcoin. There was many kind of similar protocols on top of Bitcoin, such as OmniLayer, and Vitalik actually tried to build, let's say, smart contracts on top of this OmniLayer, but he couldn't. The Bitcoin wasn't expressive enough so that this was possible at the time. So the alternative was, the only alternative was build something from scratch, and that's how we got all of those innovations that happened in the last 10 years. But then, okay, we all know what happened in Ethereum, right? We can ask ourselves what was happening at Bitcoin at the same time. Bitcoin actually, after 2015, went to this period that is known as block size wars. Have you guys heard about block size wars? Has anyone heard about it? Okay, some, cool. Block size wars was really like an interesting period in Bitcoin because this is the first time we got the opportunity to actually see how this decentralized community actually decides on some big deal, some big thing, right? The big thing was, how do we scale Bitcoin? One of the group said, well, Bitcoin has really small blocks, as Talib said, 4 megabytes, right? Pretty limited. Transactions can be expensive if there's too much of them. Let's increase the block size. Let's make those blocks bigger. Let's put more transactions in them. Let's scale it in that way. And that sounds pretty logical, right? But then the other fraction said, well, this is not a good idea because in that way we're sacrificing decentralization. And decentralization is why we started Bitcoin in the first place. So we need to keep it in the same way in order to actually not damage the whole protocol, not damage the thing why we started the Bitcoin itself. And then there was like 2 years of fighting, multiple fractions, people trying to argue on both sides. And then in the end, what happened is the small block, let's say fraction 1, which means the block size stayed the same. If you heard about Bitcoin Cash, that's actually the consequence of this block size wars because they were the ones who increased the block size, did the hard fork, but now Bitcoin Cash is kind of not near the Bitcoin original chain. So this was pretty interesting. A year after that, we got Lightning Network. You know about Lightning Network, I hope. It's a payment system. It had a great promise in terms of like you build an L2 on Bitcoin, you transfer payments, you process them, and it's much more scalable than Bitcoin. This was cool, okay, but at the same time, Lightning Network has its own limitations. The limitations are, as we know, you can only use it for payments. Most of the payments actually fail. It's not that reliable to use it. It's kind of adopted. Bitcoin maxis love it, but it's not the perfect solution that we have and that we need in order to actually scale the Bitcoin network itself. And in the next few years, in terms of innovations, again, not much happened. We had some improvements on Lightning, we had some new ideas, but none of that went live. But in 2023, something happened that kind of shaped the whole new narrative of what was happening in Bitcoin. Does anyone know what happened in 2023 Bitcoin? No? Okay. What happened is called ordinals or ascriptions. So for those of you who didn't hear about it, ordinals are actually NFTs on Bitcoin. And they are the first thing that happened because they're kind of different compared to what we have in Ethereum and other ecosystems because you basically put the whole NFT directly in the block. And it's called description, a part of it. And it was the huge innovation because it was completely different to what Bitcoiners, as the dominant culture, Maxi as the dominant culture within it, they expected. People who who build NFTs in Ethereum and other ecosystems, 2020, 2021, went to Bitcoin and started, playing with it, started doing all the things they did a couple of years back on other ecosystems. And that was crazy because it was completely opposite of what was happening on Bitcoin so far. Why it was also crazy is that it was directly visible. So, if you watch mempool, which Bitcoiners do a lot, you have multiple transactions, some are bigger, some are smaller. But then, when we had the inscription transaction, this is actually, one of those NFT collections paying the miner to mine the whole transaction directly into the block. And we see how it is much more different than what's happening on the left side. And this is actually why we started talking about it much, much more. This was a kind of big moment because activity on Bitcoin came back. Multiple people started building multiple projects. And then not only that, but the next year, we got BitVM. Tal, we spoke about BitVM in detail, so I won't go into much technical details there. But the whole point is that BitVM is an algorithm that enables you to build bridges that are much more safer and much more, let's say, trust minimized than what we had so far. Before BitVM, what you needed to do is trust a federation, trust multiple people, not to steal your Bitcoin. Now, with BitVM, you could do this much, much more safely. And that was huge because combining inscriptions that happened the year before with BitVM that's happening now, we got, of course, something in rollups. And this is what Talib was talking about. Rollups are really great thing because they actually enable you to scale Bitcoin in a way that it keeps its original promise. And this is what we're going to talk about next. So, Bitcoin started as a financial revolution. It started as a promise that we can transform the whole financial system in a way that we're in control. But this is not possible now. This is not possible because, with finance, you don't just hold your money. You try to use it. You take mortgage. You try to lend it, to borrow it. It has to be, transferable in an easy way so that everyone can use it simply. This is not what's happening currently. Also, what doesn't help is that Bitcoiners are a bit different. They really value the safety part. They don't want to risk all of it. They want to, be conservative. And initially, we have to take a trade-off. The thing is, if you want to use Bitcoin, if your parents ask you, how do I buy Bitcoin? What do? Well, you have to recommend them go to Binance, go to Coinbase. They won't spend 100 hours studying how to do hardware wallets. We should not expect most of people to do that. We should make something that's easy enough for everyone to use it while not taking the safety trade-off. And this ethos of self-custody could not be practically scaled to billions until now. Now it can. How do we scale it? Well, what we can do is we can actually build a perfect... We were trying to think what is the actual perfect financial platform, what is the actual perfect financial system. And I think it's pretty obvious. It's kind of a global, it's really easy to use. You can store your money, you can save it, you can spend it. You can actually borrow and lend it, or you have this full, opportunity to invest in a way that you find comfortable with the risk tolerance you find comfortable, and all of it is self-owned. Nothing is, held but anything other than yourself, and this is the big thing that we currently lack. But with Bitcoin and with all the new innovations that I just mentioned, this is kind of possible now, and this is something that we do in the project called Tanari. So what Tanari is doing is we're enabling you to do everything within one app that can mention and manage all of your financials from one place in a secure way. What does that mean? Well, you have the hardware wallet level security on your app. You send your payments, you send your Bitcoin in really easy ways by scanning QR codes, in a few seconds, thanks to Citria. And then like you can actually earn interest on top of it. When you store your Bitcoin, the interest is not something that's kind of DeFi, degen yield stuff. It's something that's pretty transparent. It's something that other platforms can also enable as well. And then of course we want to enable the simple connection with your bank account so that anyone can actually buy, sell, and then use it. And of course what's really important is Bitcoin-backed stablecoins so people can actually the stability of the currency they want to use. So how all of this works? Well, this is just a screenshot. Tanari is really just an app. It's an app based on simplicity, which means you don't have UTXOs, you don't have seed phrases. Sorry. You don't have any other those complicated fee management stuff that you usually see on Bitcoin. What you have is a simple face scan, you have a simple fingerprint, and everything is like easy to create account, to send transaction, and similar stuff. All of this is based on passkeys. Maybe you heard about passkeys. Passkeys are a really important concept because they enable us to do this hardware-level security with the same easiness of use as our mobile apps that we use for Web2 stuff. As I mentioned, like QR code-based payments and then lending and borrowing is something that will enable everything through one app. My point here is that there are multiple innovations that we can now leverage from Ethereum ecosystem or other similar ecosystems and apply it to Bitcoin directly. And this is the whole point of the title where Satoshi meets Solidity. We actually can combine those two. For example, Liquidity V2 version is what enables us to do Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. We see multiple people being willing to actually try it out. Bitcoin whales don't want to just sit with their Bitcoin. People who want to trade NFTs, they can now do it on Bitcoin. People doing, they want to have stable coins. They don't want for it to be backed by gold or some other company that they don't trust. It can be now backed by Bitcoin. The whole point is that Bitcoin now has finally this whole possibility of using it in a way that it should be used from the beginning. It's just that we didn't have technical solutions to do it, and now we can. This is the main reason why we're building Tanari, and we would like for you to try it out and to hear your feedback on it. That's it. We think this is the future of self-owned Bitcoin finance, and if you're interested in it, you can find us on those links, or if you can connect to me as well by scanning the QR code. And yeah, I'm happy to take your questions now. Thanks. Any questions? Yes? Okay, so the question is, what should we do with all of this in 10 years? The whole vision is, everyone who wants to try out Bitcoin and wants to use it, they use it in a way that's true to the ethos of Bitcoin. So imagine your neighbor who is not a technical person, imagine your parents, imagine your children, they all want maybe to try it out, maybe they want to use it in an advanced way, maybe they want to do something new with it. They can all do it in a way that's self-custodial, and they are in control on all of it. And we hope that eventually Bitcoin will replace traditional systems. Who knows when it will happen, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, who knows? But the thing is, like, with this, we actually have a chance. And I think this is the biggest part why we are actually doing all of this. Okay. No other questions? Yeah, one question in the back. So the question is, what's my take on Bitcoin L1, right?
We did a lot of work on L2s, and nowadays it's more and more popular to talk about the fact that we should maybe work more on L1 scale,
exactly.
L1. So we kind of prove that it's necessary, even if you have an L2, it's still necessary. So what do you think? I don't know, Bitcoiners think of this. Are you aware of what's going on with their L1?
I think that's a really good question, a really good point, because we now see this traction of should we scale the L2s or should we scale the L1 in Ethereum? What's the best deal to do that? And Bitcoin kind of does have the same problem because L1 is really simple. Like on Ethereum, you can have dApps on L1. On Bitcoin, you cannot do that much, right? And that's why we really need those layers in order to scale it. So I think that's a feature when it comes to this slow movement and slow upgrades of L1 and keeping it simple. And also, I think Vitalik, 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, he tweeted about how he sees the future of Ethereum. And then one of the tweets was we should simplify L1. same as Bitcoin, something like that. And then Bitcoin Max used that, like, oh, Vitalik wants to, get back on Bitcoin. He made a mistake and all of that. So, but I think it's really important to see, like, we start with simplicity and then we scale it. And that's also like, if you think about it, that's also how a traditional financial system works. Because like we use banks, we use mobile apps, we use all of that, but then beneath it is like central banks, but beneath is all like one really simple system that does like 10 transactions per year. Huge transactions in trillions, but it's really simple and slow. And I think if we want to make a better version of it, we should have the same approach of scaling.
I think it also said on the slides that you have the lending borrowing. Is it like implemented on chain, or it's like P2P, more of lending borrowing?
Our app?
No, BTC lending borrowing.
Lending borrowing. Oh yeah, there's actually a project called Nectra. Talik mentioned them. They're actually implementing them, and it's implemented also in Citra. So with Tanari, you access all those apps that are built on Citra directly, and of course they're using this Bitcoin that's backed by BitVM.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.